Hello everyone, and thanks for coming back to the channel. This is the RunCam Racer Nano. It's 14 millimeters by 14 millimeters. It has a 1.8 millimeter lens, screw holes in each side. It weighs almost 4.5 grams. For reference, the Caddx EOS 2 weighs 3.64 grams. With the TPU bracket, it weighs just a touch over 5 grams. I do think this is retail now. Of course, you do see two different versions online. You'll see a silver-bodied one and a black-bodied one, so you need to look at the specifications if the color of body is specific to something. But I think this is an interesting camera. Let's go ahead and start to take a look at some of the video that I have pre-recorded of me going through some of the modes and some of the customization that we can make. And I think that's something that we really have missed in this form factor in the market. I know many of you have asked about when are we going to get camera controls out of these micro cameras. You know, we've been putting these in things like the trash cans, and I know we did some modifications to put them in the Beta FPV products. Like I think I did a 75X mod with Robert Thompson. He had designed some prints. So we definitely, it's an upgrade over the typical Whoop camera, that's for sure. But sometimes, you know, as a pilot, there's certain little things that we want. This has some presets built into it already, where you can get outdoor, indoor, light track, and personal, or light tracks and personal. That's those neon gates that you see. I haven't seen too many races in the US using those light tracks, so I think that might be pretty special events. But you can control what you see on screen. It's got a camera OSD as well as camera settings. It's got a setting that we see there to have the screen either be 4:3 or 60:9. Also sharp view. Wait for a second here. I'm going to turn that on, and I point to it on my little screen here, and actually I'm pointing to the monitor in front of me there. I think I've got my email or something open, and you can definitely tell the text picks up its sharpness. Now, that's the one setting that I played with in the flight that we're going to see here in just a minute. And you can see there how it really sharpens up that text, but they may have a negative effect. You know, these camera things, it can be very, very personal, and me showing you every possible setting in a flight setting, that's just not all that feasible, because it'd be a 1,000-minute long video. So we're going to go outside, we're going to take this thing for a flight, and you're going to get to see me try basically two settings, the outdoor and then sharp view on and off. As we start the flight, keep in mind, we do have that sharp view on, and this is less than ideal. This is a DVR situation. This is not a one-to-one of what we see in the goggles. It's really the best that I can do with the equipment that I have. I felt as though it looked better in the goggles, specifically the really light green that you see in the DVR. I feel like that's probably one of the areas where it misrepresented the colorization the most in the DVR. Of course, the DVR that I'm speaking of are in the Fat Shark HDO goggles that I use to fly. I am also using a rapid fire module to receive the video signal, so those are some things to keep in mind as we look at this footage, is that it is not a one-to-one of what you will see in your goggles. And depending upon your goggles, whether they're HDOs or other goggles, it could appear different yet. But it'll give you some sort of representation of what the camera looks like. You get an idea of maybe lens fisheye if you're looking for something like that. You might be able to tell whether it's got some lens flare or it doesn't look into shadows very well. These are outside of the shot view, the factory default settings in 4:3 mode. We go up, we stare down, we go into the shade and look out towards the sun. It gives us a very basic idea of how the camera produces the image for us. And here at the end, I'm taking a look at the house just to show you those lines and the siding. I thought that might be a particularly good view for the sharp view to either show you what it does or doesn't do very well. This is where I've picked up the quad, and I've gone into the OSD, and I'm going to change the sharp view off, so you get to see that live. We got to wait for this guy to fumble around with the OSD control cable, and he's going to eventually unplug it and set the quad back down. And then we're going to go for the second part of the flight with that sharp view off. Eventually he'll get done, I promise. He'll be done in just a second. It's like he doesn't know we're recording or something here. Get to it. Let's go. Oh, now he's got to fumble around to make sure the pigtail is tucked away from the props and it's not going to get chopped off. We're trying to protect the camera and its integrity. Okay, finally, he's got it down on the ground. We're going to go for the second flight. We're pointed at the same tree, so maybe that gives you a point of reference for sharp view on or off, and whether that's something that you like or don't. I think the sharp view would probably come to play more in those months where we don't have much greenery. I have a feeling, I wish we'd had this camera 4 months ago or something of that nature to kind of prove or disprove this. but maybe other reviews can show it, is the scraggle, or where you just have branches. I have a feeling that those might be more visible or almost highlighted with that sharp view, whereas everything has leaves and whatnot on it. I think it kind of creates a shimmer for me in the goggles a little bit. That might be just a saturation or contrast that we can turn up or turn down on that sharp view within all those different settings that we have available to us, and make it more pleasing. I'm going to sit around in the shadows and look out to the sun. I'll be in the sun and look into the shadows. But overall, I thought for this size of camera, it's pretty good. I'm happy. I'm happy for a couple of reasons. I'm happy that RunCam is back in this form factor, and they're back competing in the market and back moving things forward. I'm happy that now Caddx or other camera manufacturers, if they want to compete, that they've got a point of reference of things that they're going to have to look at. You know, people want control over their image view, and giving them the ability to customize how the sensor represents the environment they're in, I think is going to be fairly important for some people. You know, in the case of tiny whoops, traditional tiny whoops that are brushed, it's probably not quite as important. But in the case of brushless whoops where we can carry a little bit more weight, or micros that are running, you know, 2-inch props or 1.8 or 1.9-inch props, or even larger, you know, I fly a lot of 2.5-inch and 3-inch props. It's going to be a pretty good thing. And then we do the same thing we did previously, looking at those lines in the siding. They're much less predominant. This is an interesting feature where you can switch through some of the presets for scenes, or you can change your view from 4:3 to 16:9. And it's kind of tricky. It took me a little while to get this. You pretty much have to have your goggles already tuned into your VTX. Whether you're using a box set like I've got on the screen, or you're using Fat Shark goggles, you've got to have those set already. Because when you power on your quad, presumably this is in a quad, that you've got to get your hand down in front as the camera kind of boots up. And it took me a few times to kind of figure out the sequence. And so when you want to switch from like scenes to NTSC or PAL, you kind of long hold your hand in front of the camera, and then when you pull it away, then it does the switch. And then when you're ready to go on to the next setting, say 16:9 or 4:3, you hold your hand down in front of the camera again for a longer period of time, and then when you pull it away, it switches. And when you're done, there may be a way to save this, but I could not figure this part out. But you just don't have your hand in front of the camera for a while, and then the camera resets, and it starts with your new settings that you've just changed it to, whether that's a scene or an aspect ratio or a viewing system. But a pretty interesting feature. I hadn't seen that before. There's one more thing I should show you. Oftentimes in our micros, we mount these using the screws on the back. Like with the Caddx EOS, they have these screws. Now this has the screw, and I don't know how well I'm going to get to show this on camera. I'm going to have to zoom in there. There's one of the screws right there. And that's about as zoomed in as I can get with my equipment, so you get a good look at that. So it's got one of those down there, and this is glued onto the back, and then another one up here. Pull this back for you. So we got little Phillips screws down in there. Those screws are substantially smaller than what you find on the Caddx EOS. So that's something else that you need to be aware of if you're building a Primo or something of that nature. If it uses those screws, I'm not sure it's going to be compatible. You may need to be prepared for some sort of mounting. They do include this mount, which they describe as a TPU printed mount. And boy, if that's TPU, doesn't look like any TPU I've ever printed. It is soft and it is flexible, as you can see in my hands. And I had it in the machine already, and it works just fine. It also comes with screws for various mounting situations. I use the longer ones, and you can see on the longer ones that it also has some thread locker already on them. So I use those longer screws. Just put this on here, and then you can mount it in a more traditional frame. You can see the screw holes line up just fine. So they have that covered for you, so if you're just looking to save a little bit of weight, and that's why I showed you the weight and the quick roll in the beginning. With all those settings and all the different customization that you can make, is the camera and the price point right for you? And please let me know what you thought of the Sharp View. I thought that was a fairly interesting feature, one I hadn't seen before, and I'd like to know what you think. For me, it seemed a little bit hard on the eyes, but maybe I just need to get used to it. If you have any comments, questions, suggestions, or otherwise, please let me know in that section down below. I appreciate your time, and thanks for watching.